All right, welcome to our webinar today. Really excited to talk a little bit about CBPL, curriculum-based professional learning, and thank you for tuning in to learn how this work is impacting and really landing with our respective affiliate groups across our ESU network. And I'm incredibly grateful to John Scretta at ESU 6, to Katrina Gottschall at ESU 8, to Bill Pulte at ESU 3, Eileen Barks at ESU 2, and Michelle Rayburn at ESU 6 for joining us. Everyone here is representing their respective affiliate groups, and we're going to really spend some time today getting a chance to see, again, where those efforts by each affiliate align with some of the CBPL work and hear from those folks that we have the good fortune to have join us today. And so I'm going to kick things off by actually throwing things over to John Scretta so that he can set the table for us with regards to what is this effort, what does it serve? So we'll talk a little HQIM as well, and the role that the ESUs are playing in not only learning, but then making sure that this meets our support of schools statewide. So, John, thanks for joining us. Go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Andrew, and great to see the fellow ESU colleagues on this call and the opportunity to have this conversation. I think it's just instrumental to our efforts as educational service units in Nebraska right now, supporting schools in attaining the aspirational and desired student learning outcomes. Over the last several years, the Nebraska Department of Education has helped to bring forward an initiative that really grew, I think, organically out of the Materials Matter efforts and identified a strong commitment to HQIM, and that would be high quality instructional materials. Essentially, when we say HQIM, what we're talking about is ensuring that the content that is taught classroom level K-12 is aligned to standards, is of high quality, and that there are processes built in place that utilize student achievement data to inform additional instructional interventions and decision makings to assure that we have optimized the chances for every student to succeed on that rigorous curriculum. The component that we found over the last several years as the Nebraska Department of Education emphasized a commitment of ESSER funding to support school districts in Nebraska, the vast majority of whom now over the last several years have adopted HQIM curriculum for their classrooms, is that, and they did that by utilizing ESSER dollars, pandemic and post-pandemic. What we've realized, of course, is that, and this is probably the Captain Obvious takeaway, but we all understand that investments in quality curriculum don't mean a thing unless that curriculum is actually implemented with fidelity and sustained over time in classrooms. And so Nebraska is a member of a national coalition through the Council of Chief State School Officers, and educational service units are at the table and participating in those conversations. So as administrators, we know that in statute and in rule, Nebraska educational service units are tasked with being cooperative and supportive in our role with the NDE. And this is a major effort to level up student achievement and to do so in a fairly systematic fashion. We also know that professional development is defined in statute and rule as the #1 priority core service provided by ESUs. So that really fundamentally recognizes the importance of teachers' own professional learning to enhance their instructional practice over time. And yet something like nearly 90%, and this is something that I came across from the Center on Education Policy, 90% of school district leaders acknowledge that it is a challenge to implement rigorous standards-based curriculum because it is so challenging to provide the high quality professional development needed. And so the CBPL, the curriculum-based professional learning, signifies a shift in our approach to ensure that we are walking alongside and supporting the sustained efforts of those schools in utilizing this rigorous instructional material. So that's what I'd say kind of by way of introduction, Andrew.
And so grateful that you did, John, as yeah, it really gives us a chance to understand the terms that we're talking about here today and the context of that work and the support that we have from our ESU administrators statewide. And as we started to talk about that there, the company that is partnering with us to help us grow in this work is Rivet Education. And so if you were there at the September PDO, they were there in support. And kind of walked us through some training on those days. We'll continue to see them through January and May and into next year. And in case you missed it, we're going to play a little video that we had as a takeaway from that time, 2 minutes, that captures a little bit of the spirit of that day and the work that Rivet does in support of this effort. And so here is Litzy Skotsky with Rivet Education.
So my name is Litzy Skotsky, and I am one of the co-founders of Rivet Education. Rivet focuses on helping primarily state education agencies and regional service centers scale the adoption and the implementation of high-quality instruction materials. We do that because it's not that we think HQIM and curriculum-based professional learning are the be-all, end-all and solve all the world's problems, but we do think that they provide a really strong foundation for good teaching and learning in classrooms. They really get at the instructional core, Elmore's instructional core. And so that's the work that our organization focuses on. Relatedly, today, the objectives are really to help the ESUs think about and digest the experience that they had yesterday going through some curriculum-based professional learning based on the Open SciEd curriculum and begin to think about or continue to think about what that means for their own work with their districts. As I've told many people, I really think Nebraska is on the bleeding edge of this work. The Nebraska Department of Education has been working on issues related to high quality instructional materials and curriculum-based professional learning for years now and have really been a leader there nationally. And as I was just telling a colleague, I think the ESUs are on the bleeding edge of this work. I hear ESUs talking about this work in a way that I hear honestly no other regional service centers around the country talking about. Yes, there was some work that Rivet did related to this topic back in May to, again, help people begin to think about what is curriculum-based professional learning, why does it matter, what does that mean for our work. But NDE and Nebraska more generally has been working on this for years, and great partners have also been involved in that work, folks like Instruction Partners and TNTP and Teaching Lab and School Kit, right? There have been loads of folks who have been welcomed into the state to support this important work.
And I love that because it reiterates a number of the points that John brought up, but also speaks to how this is a collective effort. And so grateful that we have the opportunity to have representation from every affiliate today to speak to that. And up first, we're going to have Katrina Gottschall, who is at ESU 8 and is speaking from her role with SDA there, so our staff development affiliate. Katrina, thanks.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm relatively new to the ESU world. I taught in public school, high schools for 18 years, teaching high school, predominantly high school English and some high school social studies areas. And it's been really great to join the SDA and the ESU world. It's being on the other side of the table. And the CBPL work for me has been really, really meaningful. Being on the other side as a teacher, I went through several materials adoptions, but the difference I see in the work that we're doing with SDA is that we're really focusing on that implementation science piece. How do we use our materials with fidelity and integrity, and making sure that all of our students get access to the highest quality instruction and opportunities. So coming in through the SDA lens, I think I see this work really reinforcing so much of the work we're already doing. We're in the schools all the time, working with teachers and administrators, really focusing on enhancing that Tier 1 instruction. And I see the CBPL now that I've been so invested in this process and the work that we're doing through a grant in our ESU currently with secondary ELA teachers. I really see CBL as really the core of the anchor, if you will, of everything that we are doing. Because as you said earlier, if we don't have that strong instruction at the center of everything, then ultimately all the other things, while they still matter, but they will have less impact. So the work that we're doing with CBPL, I think, has the potential of really moving the bell curve of learning for all students, empowering teachers in a way that maybe they haven't had in the past. I know I certainly didn't have access to in the past with a more traditional form of professional development that maybe happened once a quarter. I think the key to this work is our school districts, partnering us with this idea of continuous support and continuous development, and finding a formula of time that will work for our schools, because they will see the data really reflects that positive movement that we are always looking for. And really, I think it also becomes a matter of teacher retention and recruitment, that teachers feel empowered and supported, not just when they adopt materials, but what happens after, and helping them develop their own capacity to really look at those materials and just maximize and optimize their use to really benefit all students. And I think ultimately that's just a winning formula.
Well, I love that. And you touched upon there at the end too, that this is a process. This is something that needs to be ongoing support. It's not something that you just unbox and are great at it that first time that you try to implement that in the classroom. And maybe as a quick follow-up, as you started to work with teachers with the CBPL kind of guiding that process, maybe speak to that experience a little bit, as I know that's something that our SDA friends are pretty actively involved in on a regular basis.
Well, ESU 8's in a very rural part of the state, north central, northeast Nebraska, and our school districts are often pretty spread out. So we started this process sort of doing a survey of schools who have adopted materials for secondary ELA. The data really led us to focusing on that area. And we found some schools that were in the first 3 years of an adoption and were interested in digging into those materials further. We also surveyed principals to see if they had expectations of use of materials and where our schools landed in that. So ultimately, we had 3 schools that decided they would like to work with us further under this grant that we received to do this work. And so we're utilizing walkthroughs using a common tool. We're helping build the capacity of our building principals and the teachers involved in our cohort to recognize how to look for rigor, how to look for not just engagement, because you can be very engaged in a class, but well below grade level. So sort of shifting the lens of, I think, sometimes what's often looked for in a classroom, to really understand, how do you identify rigor? How do you identify student-led opportunity? How do you identify high-level questioning? And where is that happening and how is it happening? Who's doing most of the speaking and the lifting in the classroom? And those are not always obvious things, I think, that have been looked for in the past. And I think shifting that lens a little bit has been a big aha for teachers and for principals as well. And I think the best part for me is just getting to come together and learn from each other from a place of vulnerability and growth, and not a feeling of judgment or evaluation.
Wow, love all of that. And I really appreciate your vulnerability and being here today to share some of these, because we also are growing, right? So I think we want to give ourselves grace and time to be able to develop as those folks who are in support, and doing that in a way that is reflective of what the CBPL training is through our work with Rivet. So Katrina, one more question, I guess, as we maybe wrap up speaking about SDA specifically. Hopefully, I mean, our intent with this webinar really is so that our colleagues statewide, regardless of affiliate, are tuning in. But what would you say specifically to our SDA friends that maybe are kind of new to this conversation or just getting started, to encourage them in this work that is, as we've said to this point, right, a bit of a process and something that takes some time and continued commitment to. So I'll throw that back to you.
Well, I think for me, it was sort of having to deconstruct what I thought I knew about good teaching a little bit, and reconstruct it from a different perspective. And so that was the first thing I had to kind of lean into this work, because there's a little bit of yeah, well, I was a good teacher and I did these things. And I think sometimes if we're coming from the classroom, it takes a little time to deconstruct that a little bit. But for my fellow SDA folks, I already see them doing such incredible work. And I think that this is kind of like a vehicle. Everything else comes along with this. And if we all start using this a common process, common language, common understanding of how this is sort of the center of a lot of the other work that we're doing, and find that common ground and how we can embed it in the work, no matter what sort of our tasks are and what our roles are within SDA. Where does this work fit, and how can I use it to help support the other roles? And I think in so doing that is like planting seeds in lots of different places, using that common language and that common process. And I think over time, our schools who are less familiar with this model will start hearing that message in various capacities, and hopefully we'll start making that connection that, oh, okay, this is all connected and ultimately is going to just strengthen the learning that's happening in our school community.
Terrific. Oh, yeah, strengthening that. And specifically, as you mentioned earlier, and this is my little segue here, Tier 1 supports, because it is shared effort and work. We're also grateful that Michelle Rayburn is joining us. And so we're going to have her speak for our ESPD, our ESU Special Populations Directors. And so, Michelle, thanks for joining us. And as you kind of heard what Katrina shared there, where do you see this work meeting your affiliates' present efforts?
Well, I think that in special population, special education, which is the majority of my career has been spent there, we have focused so much on Tier 3, on the individualized angle. And then when you look at what's happening for that learner in the context of the education environment, that's the big aha, right? Like let's meet the needs of more learners through what we're doing by our standard practice, Tier 1, and being good partners then in scaffolding the support, so we don't bankrupt our system at Tier 2 and Tier 3 because we're meeting the needs of more learners by what we do in Tier 1. And I think also as a longtime special educator, a lot of times special educators were not at the same table for those conversations about standards, about instruction. And so then it kind of became this siloed process of support only happening in the vacuum of Tier 3, of the lens at the individualized level. And so while that is important, we also need to have that connection, that thread running down through Tier 1 so that we're better able to be better partners. And so, like as Katrina said, what's happening for instruction on the daily at that level, that now we can be better partners and have more space to support that individualized learner, but in the context of inclusive practices that are happening for all. So super excited that I'm able to be in these conversations, and that feels new and somewhat different, and love the proximity that I get to these folks and thinking about, okay, I think if you've always done, you get what you've always gotten. And we know that we want to improve outcomes. And so how do we be more inclusive? How do we meet the needs of more learners? And that's through leaning into this work.
This might be a bit of an oversimplification, but would you say that by shifting, as you mentioned, kind of the focus in addition to Tiers 2 and 3, but with the stronger emphasis in Tier 1, that it leads to a little bit more proactive opportunities, is what I might say? Am I onto something there, I guess, as it's been your experience?
Yeah, I do think you're onto something there. I think it can be more proactive or intentional, or at least in the context of all of us having this common goal of improving outcomes for our learners, and knowing that, we have more and more diversity of learners. And so how do we partner together? So I don't think that's an oversimplification. It's front loading that we're at the table around the concept of the standards and the high quality instructional materials, and now how we're doing curriculum-based professional learning. So there are even routines and vocabularies that we can be a better partner to bring our expertise to the table at that individualized level, but in what's happening already, because it's inclusive, because there's the ability to engage all learners from where they are. So I think it is proactive. It feels proactive and intentional and like a true collaborative partnership rather than siloed work.
I would imagine then, and this is maybe a reiteration of points that have already been said, but the CBPL provides us with language and common I don't know, framework within which to facilitate that dialogue between the respective stakeholders. Yeah, I mean, I've seen some nods on here, so that's really good too.
Better conversations. You can have more meaningful, intentional, strategic conversations because we have this shared understanding of where we're at and where we're trying to go. And so now I can be as a specialist or a support person, I can have a better conversation, I can provide for better supports that are aligned with our common goal, common direction for all learners. So.
Absolutely. And that's, I hope part of what people leave today's conversation with is a sense of the role that plays in maybe, yeah, our cross-affiliate conversations and our respective work, right? But the opportunities that present themselves there. And speaking of cross-affiliate, we'll move to TLT at this point in time. And so Eileen Barks is here to represent TLT and to speak to where she's seen this work connect with the things that she's had the opportunity to do at ESU2 and also statewide. So Eileen, as you've heard the conversation today, what's that got you thinking?
Yes, and yes, and yes. Like it's all, everything that everyone is saying from the different affiliates is exactly what we need. So I'm speaking from the TLT affiliate, Teaching and Learning with Technology. And our role, our mission is to connect educators to resources and best practices and emerging technologies to transform teaching and learning within the classroom. So our aspirations as a teaching and learning technology affiliate would be to partner with SDA and ESPD and the classroom teachers to implement right alongside. So there's beautiful technology pieces that could be used to go deep into some of the content pieces. But we want to make sure that the content pieces are the HQIM, the high quality instructional material. And we don't want to train teachers outside. Like I don't want to just train teachers on Padlet or train teachers on utilizing Google Slides. I want to work with them right there in their materials, in that high quality instructional material to further those 21st century learning skills, creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, and communication. And it would be an aspiration for us as a TLT affiliate to model a lesson right alongside with an SDA person and say, here's a bit of technology that could help further the learning and could go deeper. And the curriculum-based professional learning, using the materials right there with it, that's the key. That's the key for us. You know, we want to make the technology intentional and make it stick, but we want to make sure that we're using it intentionally with the right materials, not just for technology's sake, but for furthering the learning's sake.
I mean, that harkens back to a webinar that we had the chance to do. It would have been last spring, where Deb Paulman and Dorian Avey and Lane at 16 about HQIM, CBPL, and then UDL. And really, then that also lends itself all the way to that inclusion tier one. I mean, you can really have that conversation span the entirety of the 3 affiliate groups represented and the comments made there. And so I'm going to add that in the show notes for this. So if you're accessing this on YouTube, you can check that out because that was a really great conversation to press into that more, to see where that technology support comes around some of these efforts. And so, yeah, Eileen, maybe to give you a little bit of space here to ask, what has been your experience with this as you've gotten a chance to work with educators in your area or to talk to colleagues in TLT as far as their thoughts and implementation of those CBPL practices towards HQIM implementation?
Yeah, I've been partnering with actually our math people, Kelly, and I'm not a math person, but Kelly Georges is going to watch this and she's going to tell me I am a math person because I'm an elementary teacher. So I am a math person and I do use my math smarts. But we have been doing very similar to what Katrina's been doing at ESU 8, but we've been focusing on math implementation with the Reveal series, and we do math walks and conversations right in there in the curriculum, and identifying places in the curriculum where it makes sense to incorporate technology to further those 21st century learning skills. our curriculum-based professional learning, our high-quality instructional materials do label some technology pieces, but at times we need to go discover other pieces that make sense for that school or for the students in that area. So partnering with Kelly and math has been a great experience.
Love that, and the partnerships, and hopefully that again is a common thread and theme across today's conversation as we're seeing that play out in the work, and the implementation of that technology or the utilization of that technology wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for our NOC friends. And so Bill Pulte is here to speak to the role that NOC plays in supporting this effort. I know Bill got a chance to be at the September PDO to learn a little bit from Rivet Education and our experience there. And so, Bill, what are your thoughts as you kind of listen in today and think about where that meets the work of our NOC affiliate?
Well, first of all, it worked out really well that I went right after Eileen because I think Eileen sets a stage for just showing that in the last how much things have changed in 20 years around technology being used around instructional materials and curriculum and things like that. And so, as a NOC group, we absolutely understand that our role in this is definitely on the periphery. But we also understand that we're different than some states. I mean, I talk to other states' service agencies, and the technology people, the NOC group, the IT people aren't at the table. And so to be invited to those, I think sets up the state just to be maybe proactive about things. So we at the last NOC meeting talked about our role in this, and we realize our role is going to be mainly in support, but it's those things that Eileen's group finds that says, hey, we want to use this, and making sure that we have a process for onboarding students, onboarding staff, and doing a lot of that kind of work, and working with our districts to make sure that that can happen as easily as possible. I don't think there's any technology person in the state who wants to stand in the way of student learning, although sometimes it may look that way because things aren't in place as quickly. So being at the table at the forefront allows us to maybe be more proactive in making sure that those systems are ready to go and ready for teachers and students. And then on the back end, one of the things we talked about that just has not been a conversation around the state, but we think that possibly it could be, is we've got a few ESUs who inside IT departments have data structures to store large sets of data and do reporting and do a lot of that kind of stuff. And so, just working with the other affiliates to say, okay, is this stuff that we should be collecting more data on and doing more reporting on and helping with that. And so, that's something that we talked about at the NOC meeting in November, and just thought, okay, maybe there is a way we can help with this. And so just being a part of the conversation, I think, is great for NOC.
We're grateful for your support and for your voice here and the opportunity to see where that affiliate's work meets this larger conversation. Maybe 2 points to bring us home here. And the first, I would say, Katrina, is this has been something that we know SDA has really taken the lead in this area. And so everyone else is certainly talked about the support roles and kind of the growth of this effort around that. As you had the opportunity to hear from everyone, could you kind of bring that to a summation or what that leaves you with as far as a parting message maybe for your SDA colleagues and for all of us really across affiliates?
So I've been listening and I'm reflecting a little while ago, we brought in Dr. Scott Butler and we talked about Hope Science through our SDA. And two things that really stuck with me since I went through training with Hope Science is creating pathways and creating agency. Those are two major components of having high hope. And I think I look at the CBPL work and the work that has been done across all these different affiliates. And that's something I hear in common, that we are creating pathways and we're creating agency for our teachers, for our administrators, for our students. And we're doing this sort of, it's like an inquiry if I'm a social studies person, and asking questions. What do our students need to learn? What are the pathways that are there for them to learn? And how do we use our materials to look at those pathways? And then what kind of instructional moves do we need to be making as in our building culture to make sure that learning is accessible for all of our students? Because all students need pathways and all students need agency. But in order for them to have that, our teachers need to have that. And continuous learning with the CBPL, I think, is what offers that agency and those pathways.
Well, thank you for that final reflection. And then since John kicked it off for us, I'll throw it back to him as well, maybe to bring things to a close. Having heard about the great work that's going on statewide and the way in which this CBPL effort meets everyone's support of each other, of teachers, and ultimately of students and learning. What would be your parting message as we bring things to a close?
I would just reiterate, I mean, everything my colleagues on this conversation have stated just really resonates with the centrality of this work right now for Nebraska's ESUs and the profound importance that this endeavor has for helping to ensure that every student has equitable learning opportunities and that every teacher in every classroom is receiving the ongoing support from their educational service unit to ensure that the professional learning opportunities they have are coherent, that they're aligned, that they are right in the heart of their classroom practice and addressing their most pertinent needs. And in doing so, the ESUs that are featured on this call, for instance, ESUs 2 and 6 and 8, I know are members of the CCSSO state support grant, and we're working diligently on that. And yet our intention as ESUs in Nebraska is always to be thinking about replicability, scalability, and that means that we love to celebrate successes and to share what works with one another. And our continued effort in that with CBPL is going to continue to produce excellent learning outcomes for Nebraska students.
I am incredibly grateful for everyone's time today and the expertise that you bring from all the time, effort, and energy that you pour into your respective roles. And I'm always inspired and encouraged when we are able to have opportunities like this to come together because I think sometimes we can get a bit siloed or a bit busy in the routines of our day to day to really look up and realize how we're all very much in this together across the ESUs, across the state, and in our own respective ways. But it's very uplifting. And so thank you all for bringing that aspect to our conversation today as well. Hope others glean that from this. And thank you to those watching who are also very much every bit as busy and active as I'm sure any of us are. And we're really excited to continue these conversations in January, to have those then come back around in May PDO and into the next school year. And so I guess we'll just kind of bring this to a close and say, I hope everyone has a great rest of the semester as we're recording this here at the end of the fall semester here. And we look forward to seeing everybody in January. So thank you so much.